in the past. That was the reason why, for example, Maldives has always been a very progressive. We had and responsibilities. To the report, as Maldives' legal system do not have a limitation period within the Maldives judicial system and legal system, any matter that has occurred any point of time in the history could always be invoked before any court of law at any point of time. As for yet, we do not have a limitation period for both civil and criminal matters. So, in that respect, it would not be fair from a government perspective to cut off from certain period of time to a certain period of time, to limit, for the purpose of a compensation, to limit the compensation issue for a particular period of time. Because in the absence of a limitation period, you could always argue, and you have the right to invoke any grievances at any point of time. This is more so in the light of many unfortunate incidents that has occurred in the history of the Maldives. Going back beyond 1977, for example, there are major two incidents which I would like to draw to the attention of the committee, which the Maldives history notes with very heavy heart and with grievances. In one incident is known as Addu and Huadu uprising, southernmost two atolls, whereby we have seen many incidents of cruelty and torture, and the victims have been raising their voices since then. In one incident of the Huadu atoll, the Tinadu Island alone of the possibly removed from that island, and the entire island was destroyed at that point of time. So we have that kind of a history, and it is therefore compelling that when we talk about compensating to one particular period of time or one particular group of people, we should all see this in its entirety. And in a more recent time, for example, in 1988, there was a mercenary attack on the population of the Maldives. The attack took place on the capital, in which 19 Maldivians' lives were lost. And the victims' family still awaits the compensation. So as a government, we believe that since we have an independent judiciary, it is always, and we do not have a limitation period, it is always fair for us not to pick and choose certain particular group or time limitation or period. Rather, it be left for the victims to invoke these instances before a court of law. This is, again, important in the light of the size and resource of the country. It's a very poor country. Although generally it is little better than other countries in the region, our budget even for this year is in deficit, and hence any question of giving compensation in this regard by government's own initiative will put the rights of many others in jeopardy. With regard to deciding whom the compensation should be awarded, there is also the question of a legality. We will have, as a legal matter, we will have to establish first the liabilities or the compensation issues on a judicious and fair basis, rather than on a mere statements or assertions. So all these questions remain there. It should be that these should be sought. And interestingly, we have even now also, there are ongoing cases where more than 30 to 50 years old cases are still heard both in civil and criminal courts. So there are precedents that the courts do admit and do entertain such claims. Now, the other contentious issue, of course, is the question of death penalty. And question the current practice remains same. There is the status quo hasn't changed at this point of time. The only thing is, in the recent time, we have witnessed in our society a surge of crime trend. And as a very small nation, the entire country, I would say, is currently grappling with this trend of increase in crimes. It worries everybody. For example, this year alone, we have so far witnessed 7 murder cases for a country that is only about 350,000 population, not to mention all other kinds of serious crimes and drug trafficking. The country is really struggling how to address this surge of crimes in the society. And it is in the light of these occurrences that this whole debate has re-emerged in the society. There is no official government debate or discussion or white paper being tabled before a cabinet on the issue. But I must say there are scattered debates in the society, especially in the light of prevailing criminal offenses in the country. And this goes in every section of the society. Some members of the legislation do. Politicians, and of course, the common people do raise the question of how to address this trend of crime in the country. Now, it has come in this perspective of finding a kind of a answer, a kind of a solution to increase in trend of crime in the country. So I'm hoping that as a country, now we have a criminal procedure code currently in the parliament. It was drafted with the assistance of United Nations and with the assistance of a professor, Paul Robinson of Columbia University, and it was as a incorporated Muslim offences alongside with the codified offences that existed in other jurisdictions of the country. So I'm hoping that when this piece of legislation passes, it will answer all other questions that arises. The progress of the code currently is that it is with the committee stage of the parliament, and the chair of the committee has recently announced that in about 2 months' time he would be able to finish the work of the committee stage and send it back to the floor of the parliament for a debate, and then passage of the bill will take place after a while. Now, there was the other question relating to the issue of inheritance. Again, interestingly, this is a question which every Muslim country tries to find a modern and progressive answer. And we have seen in some Muslim countries, they've attended to some elements of inheritance. The Maldives being a Muslim country, as we have said, we repeatedly saying it, the Constitution very clearly subjects Maldives law to be based or to be harmonized in line with the Sharia law. And therefore, every law that is in existence should harmonize with the features or with the tenets of Islam. But again, here, the Maldives society has been making quite progress. For example, in matters of land division, Land Law Act very clearly provided that there should be no difference, no discrimination made when the land is divided among the legal heirs, and therefore no discrimination between male and female when it comes to land matters. And land being the most precious thing in a society which has more water than land. Again, the regulation in the Land Law Act also provides, because under the Act, the relevant ministry is empowered to promulgate regulation. So the regulation relating to Land Law Act again provides an interesting instance where it says where a female dies or where a parent dies, leaving only female as legal heirs, the land property should not go beyond the legal heirs, beyond her immediate legal heirs, beyond the family members. Or his, in other words, avoiding other legal heirs under Islamic inheritance law. So that is again a progress that is being made. And on this issue, I must say that in practice, it is very rare for Maldivian families to go on a discriminatory line between female and male siblings or heirs, legal heirs. Rather, always it is divided among them. They understand and they do it on an equal basis. So the practice is quite, in a way, harmonizes with what we all believe to be equitable and fair. Now, from this point on, I will hand over to Honorable Dunia Mamoon to answer some of other questions relating to social and gender-related issues. I will also always be happy to receive further questions relating to my answers. Thank you.
Madam Chair, distinguished members of the committee, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I will touch on the gender issues that were raised and also maybe touch upon the issue of corporal punishment for children that was raised by some of the committee members. I think it was noted that some of the progress in the areas of gender equality and women's empowerment has been rather slow. I admit that the country has a lot of challenges still remaining. However, this is an area where we believe good progress has been made by the Maldives. Maldivian women, even traditionally, has been active in social and political and community life of our country. And in recent times, the governments have given particular emphasis in promoting gender equality and women's rights. This we have witnessed in the fact that women's representation within the cabinet has been, while not substantial, it's something that has been given particular focus. And also women's participation in parliament. Prior to 2008, we had, I think, something like 5% of women represented in parliament. This is again an area where a lot of work has been and continues to be done. At present, the number has somewhat decreased, and this is an area of concern that the government is committed to improving. I think the question posed was, do we have public awareness campaigns, and what is the work that is being carried out? Definitely work through the media and also work through the education system is something that is that we are undertaking in order to change societal viewpoints and cultural attitudes to this. So I think everybody understands that this is a challenging area, but much progress has been made and continues to be made. In particular, I want to refer to the fact that the government of Dr. President Wahid, the new government of national unity has placed particular focus on including women in the cabinet, and at present we have 3 women in our cabinet, and more specifically, the Ministry of Gender has been reinstated. This was abolished again under President Nasheed, but we believe that it's important to have a particular ministry focusing on the gender issues in order to ensure better women's empowerment. I mentioned Parliament earlier. Within Parliament, representation continues to be low, but we are heartened that even in the local council elections, a number of women did stand and did get elected into the local councils. And the political parties themselves are giving focus for training and addressing the challenges that women face in terms of political participation. I want to note that key bills adopted in recent years, such as the Civil Service Act, the Employment Act, and the Pension Act, gave careful consideration to eliminate discrimination, including that based on gender. And to strive for gender parity in economic issues, the government has introduced a temporary special measure in which 40% of the government-sanctioned SME loans would be given to female entrepreneurs. At the local community level, 4 women's groups have been provided with grants to kickstart their businesses. Finally, want to mention the fact that we believe that the enactment of the anti-domestic violence legislation is a significant milestone in the Maldives. The bill itself is very comprehensive, covering a wide range of areas, including prevention and also the responsibilities of the law enforcement agencies in terms of bringing justice, supporting victims, and also ensuring that perpetrators are, taken or go through the criminal procedures to ensure they are responsible for their actions, and also to help rehabilitate them as well. We fully understand that just having legislation alone is not enough to address this very wide issue, and in that regard, further regulations, awareness raising, and training is of particular importance. We hope that we are able to take this process ahead in terms of bringing in shelters for women who need them, and also really reducing this issue in our society. I just wanted to touch on the issue of corporal punishment that was raised yesterday as well. The Children's Rights Act specifically says that corporal punishment is not allowed for children under 18 years of age. And I think yesterday somebody mentioned that it was only education ministers sort of something he said or announced saying that this was not possible, but it's actually in legislation, and it is not a common practice in Maldives at present. I am aware there are instances, and as the Human Rights Commission report has marked, I'm happy that the Commission itself is investigating these issues and looking into it in order to ensure that we address any instances that are occurring and ensure that we don't see this practice happening in Maldives. It is not a widespread problem. There are maybe minor instances, and I think that's something that we do need to work on many fronts, and definitely the government is committed to working in this area. So I'll pass the floor back to the head of the delegation.
The CONI, whether the CONI will also be looking to the criminal elements that may have occurred in relation with 7th and 8th of the February. Let me tell Honourable Committee that the clear mandate of the committee is to look into the circumstances relating to the transfer of power on that particular day and events that has taken place within that period of time. But again, on this, if there are criminal offences having occurred on that particular day and on that particular period, in addition to the CONI, if the CONI has found, CONI finds in its finding that there are such elements that has taken place, they may draw these to the attention of the relevant institutions in the country. One being, of course, that of the Maldives Police Service. And in addition to that, there are various other institutions that have the mandate to look into the criminal elements. This includes the judiciary. The Prosecutor General is empowered to ask for a probe. He can order a probe into any incidents if he, in his honest opinion, believes that it warrants for a criminal investigation. He can order and compel the Maldives Police Service to undertake such investigation. It's been given overarching power on this issue. And in addition to the independent prosecutor general, who is appointed by Parliament and answerable to the Parliament only, the Maldives Human Rights Commission is also, I believe, is mandated to has the right and parties to appear before it. And in one of the recent instances, for example, the Human Rights Commission has undertaken such investigation in relation to the abduction of the Chief Judge of the Criminal Court by the former President Nasheed, and it has produced its report in relation to that as well. So there is a precedent on that as well, and the Human Rights Commission was asked by the Prosecutor General to undertake those investigations in the circumstances that was prevailing at the time. In his opinion, the Maldives Police Service at that time would not be in a best position to undertake a fair and a judicious investigation. Now, beside the Human Rights Commission, the Maldives Police Integrity Commission itself also has certain limited power to ask to certain circumstances relating to criminal offences that may have occurred through Maldives police force. Now, there was the other question relating to how independent the Maldives Police Integrity Commission. Let me explain to the distinguished committee that the committee is fully independent. The Integrity Commission is fully independent, as it is a common feature of some of the independent commission in the Maldives that it comes into operation through certain pieces of legislation. For example, in this instance, this commission was brought in from within Maldives Police Service Act, but the appointment and removal of the entire commission is subjected to the Parliament. The Home Minister has no role at all to their accountability, appointment and removal. Hence, it is fully independent body. The only function of the committee that relates to the Home Minister is they are required to submit their findings to the Home Minister, and it is understandable, the Home Minister being in charge of the Maldives Police Force, to what action he needs to take and what are the things that he requires to further improve and develop. The committee can make its recommendation. In its recommendation, the Commission also can ask to take administrative action as well as criminal prosecution. But in case of a criminal prosecution, again, there is a full independence given to the Commission, in the sense that the Commission directly can send the case to the Prosecutor General. It doesn't have to get the approval from the Home Minister. And there are instances where this has occurred. In most recent time, for example, in relation to what has occurred on the 8th of February, there is one case already being sent for prosecution directly by the Police Integrity Commission. So as to the ratio of the cases that is being sent, probably it may be because they may have recommendation more to take administrative action rather than warranting for a prosecution, considering to the nature of the circumstances and offences that may have been committed by them. Now, coming back, I just want to add one more thing with what Honourable Dunia has said with regard to corporal punishment. In addition to the Children's Rights Act, there is also a regulation which has the force of the law promulgated by the Education Ministry, which also prohibits the implementation or carrying out of any form of a corporal punishment on the children. And this is something that is not common in the Maldives, in fact very rare. And as a society, of course, you will always find instances that is where you have to answer and further improve. And we were one of the I think a few countries which very early on has taken action on this form, on this particular form of punishment on our children at schools. Then, yeah, again, yeah.
Madam Chair, distinguished members of the committee, let me touch again on a few of the other matters raised by the committee members. In particular, our reservation on Article 18, freedom of religion, and the question asked whether we will remove the reservation to this article. As a special rapporteur on freedom of religion has noted, being a Maldivian and being a Muslim have become interlinked and inseparable. There is strong public support for Maldives being and remaining a 100% Muslim country. Indeed, if anything, the advent of democracy and with greater freedom of expression and diluting of central control over cultural matters have intensified moves away from freedom of religion. As mentioned by the head of delegation in his introductory remarks, the Maldives maintains a reservation to Article 18, and there are currently no plans to withdraw that reservation. This is not a dogmatic government policy or preference, but rather a reflection of the deep societal belief that Maldives always has been and always should be a 100% Muslim nation. Laws, like government itself, must be based to a large extent on the will of the people. That said, I do believe government has two important roles that it can and will play. The first is to ensure that our laws and practice designed to protect the social and religious unity of the Maldives do not, as a side effect, undermine the rights of others, including, for example, foreign workers in the Maldives. This is why the government upholds the right of people of other faiths to freely practice their religion in private and to import religious icons and literature for personal use. The second role of government, in my view, is to promote and participate in national debates on religious issues, including women's rights and corporal punishment and other issues that we have been discussing here. Another sensitive matter is that of nationality, which is linked to religion in the Maldives. While the government is aware of international concerns regarding the limitation of citizenship to persons of Muslim faith, it is not our interpretation of the Constitution that people will lose their citizenship. This is because Article 9b of the Constitution clearly stipulates that no one may be deprived of citizenship. This is our view. This, in our view, limits the Muslim-only conditionality to foreigners wishing to become Maldivian citizens. These people would need to convert to Islam. However, this is merely our interpretation, and for legal clarity on the issue, a case would need to be brought to the Supreme Court. So I'll pass back to Head of Delegation again. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let me.
Microphone, please.
Thank you very much. With the permission of the chair, let me again explain on the issue of the criminal sanctions that are available in the Maldives. There was, I believe, a question yesterday with regard to certain other forms of punishments that are available in the Islamic Sharia. This question was the question of amputation and stoning to death, whether these punishments are available in the Maldives. And if not, why only the punishment of a flogging was carried out in the Maldives. Now, in this particular question, we have not been implementing, and we never implemented the punishment of amputation and stoning to death, except in a long time back in the history of the time. But in modern history, it was never carried out. It has never been carried out. And again, the thinking of the Maldives society as somehow the jurists has been able to interpret Islamic punishments to harmonize the thinking of society. And the only form of the punishment that was retained at this point of a time, other than theoretically, of course, death penalty is there, but of course there is a moratorium. then the only form of the punishment is flogging that is being carried out at this moment. Beside that, there were certain other questions relating to one of the questions of current president was on the ballot alongside with former President Nasheed. The answer is yes, because in a presidential system, the candidates always goes to the ballot along with their running mates or the possible vice presidents. On this instance, President Nasheed went running mate and ultimately as his vice president. Now, on the question of possible retraction of promise to an early election, this was never a promise. It was always maintained by the government that the circumstances are now being handed over to be investigated by this independent commission. And whatever the outcome of the commission, the government, without any reservation, will accept its findings. And in light of the finding, if the country will have to go for an early election, then the government will always submit to that finding. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, committee members. Good morning once again. I would also like to thank the committee members for the comments that was raised yesterday on the reporting mechanism and the format of our treaty reporting. I'd just first like to say that Maldives, as being a small island state with a quarter of a million, over 300,000 people, so it's the limitation in terms of capacity to report on our obligations. It seems a huge, constraint, and it also makes it very difficult for many small island states, especially our countries who have very few, people who have been trained on this kind of international conventions and just to handle human rights issues. Starting from that point, I would also like to comment on the Common Core document. We have maintained a Common Core document as distinguished members. This document has been facilitated by the OHCHR. Government of Maldives requested for such assistance because we had a lot of pending treaty obligations. We were not able to report on our treaties, and hence we requested such assistance, whether they will be able to develop as a model in which we will be able to come on reporting under each convention. So this is the first, issue of addressing on treaty obligations. And has been for a very long time having only one person dealing with such human rights issues and also on responding to treaty obligations. So that is another concern for us. However, the government of Maldives, my government, would like to honor the treaty obligations, and this is why we have made sure that we did develop this Common Core document with the assistance of the OHCHR advisor, and in order to also meet the treaty deadlines, we ensure that along with the Common Core document, we will have a small treaty reporting which will add on whatever developments that have taken place. We also welcome the comments that were, comments and suggestions that were put forward by the committee members. I think this is very helpful as we are working in progress, and we would like to learn and benefit from other experiences, but in order to also match and balance what kind of capacity we have and also meet the international obligations on treaty reporting. the OHCHR has been requested by the government of Maldives to place another human rights advisor, and we have also, been signaled that there is going to be a OHCHR advisor shortly. We have welcomed that, and we would also like the advisor to work with the Maldives Foreign Ministry and our stakeholders, as well as the Human Rights Commission, so that this will also build on how competent we are, and also to address these issues as sufficiently as the committee members require us to do. And in order also to say that with the specific reporting under each treaty, it is an intensive work that we have to do. So I think in future we will also try to update whatever that is available at that point of time, but still try to maintain this common core document. A lot of countries like Australia has also followed this model, Maldives followed this model, and it has been very helpful for us. Committee members, specifically to my delegation, has also made us aware that in future we should also try to somehow come up with a treaty reporting that will address the ongoing issues or current updates that are there, and also improve on our written reporting mechanism. So we would like to look into that, and we'll of course be speaking to our stakeholders on this issue. But I just would like to countries have, but just the small island developing countries, which are constrained by the enormous task that is put forward before them. But I think we have done quite well. My government has been able to present last year on the 3rd, and we are here today, responding to ICCPR. This shows our keen interest and commitment to address to our treaty obligations. I thank you, treaty members.
Madam Chair, I just want to add also on the comment made regarding the government and the promise of. I think there is a misunderstanding here. Definitely following the transfer of power, there was a lot of discussions and sort of pressures also on Maldives from many areas. However, our president has made it clear he has established an independent commission looking into issues of transfer of power. So before the findings come out, I think there is no room or scope for discussion on election dates. According to our constitution, the next election is in 2013. In order to bring it ahead, we would need an amendment to the constitution, and this is not a simple matter. It requires 2/3 majority of parliament in order for the amendment to be passed through. However, the government has already committed, saying that should there be a need, and should the political parties agree on this, then we would be going ahead with bringing in this amendment. But I think we have to wait and see till end August, till the commission findings come out. And I think it is not right to pronounce guilty something that has not been investigated purely based on allegations of our political opposition at present. So I just wanted to clarify that and to explain that once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, to the question of freedom of religion and expression, and relating to one instance whereby Mr. Rashid, an attack on Mr. Rashid, this on the basis of the things that he has written on his blog and on the opinion he has expressed publicly. I want to explain to the committee that again, there's no particular motive has been established so far. As I explained earlier, currently the entire society is struggling to cope up with the surge of a crime as in general in the society, and it has seen no difference or discrimination between its victims. We have seen young, old, women, children, and in recent and as recent at the last victim was a prominent lawyer in the country. And in each instance, we have witnessed some more grievous offences has taken place. For example, as recently as this month, the prominent lawyer was murdered So again, the investigation has been going on this relevant case as well. We have seen that he was also being subjected to target during 2010 as well, and in that particular instance also the government of the time has tried to investigate, and in one instance I think he was also detained for a short period of time. So it is not for us to yet to determine the motive or intention of particular attacks that was carried out on him. Now, coming back to one question that was again raised yesterday about torture being systematic and the apparent lack of venue to address these grievances. Let me explain to the committee that as any other society, as I have explained, that the very reason why we have seen a very progressive constitution in the country and many other relevant pieces of legislation and been vigorously pursuing international convention is that we want not to repeat the things that has happened in our history and in the past, and we want to move on and live as a democratic and Islamic society. And in these instances, with this regard, we have seen, for example, the current constitution very clearly provides different provisions with the intention of providing safeguards against torture and cruelty. For example, Article 16 of the Constitution very clearly says that the rights that are enshrined in the Constitution be interpreted, one, harmoniously in a modern society, second, subject to Islamic Sharia. Second, other than Article 16, Article 48 of the Constitution very clearly says that no individual should be subjected to arbitrary detention and arrest. The reason why we have brought all these detailed articles into the Constitution is based on the experience that we have all experienced in the past. And Article 49 of the same Constitution again states the ground of arrest. This is again in terms of a constitution rare to be seen, because in all other jurisdictions they may have they may have legislated this in a separate piece of legislation, most possibly in a criminal procedure court. But in our case, we have enshrined all these relevant provisions in great detail in the Constitution, simply because we do not want to experience the things that we have, as I said, experienced in our long history. And as a result of that, I must say there is a broad mechanism, a very systematic, broad and wide mechanism currently available within the judicial and legal system of the country. In terms of the constitution of the country, for example, it provides, as I said, several provisions. In addition to these articles, Article 68 of the Constitution is very important, because it very clearly says any right that are enshrined in the Constitution should be interpreted in line with the way that it is being interpreted in modern, progressive and open democracies. And it should also harmonize to the conventions that the Maldives has subscribed. And again, Article 69 of the same Constitution interestingly says, while interpreting these rights by any tribunal or judicial body, it should not interpret in a way that would narrow down or that would limit these rights. So attempts have been made to address all these grievances. Other than constitutional provisions, as I said, we have an independent judiciary, we have an independent prosecutor general. Previously, the prosecution was attached alongside with the Attorney General's function. But since Attorney General sits as a cabinet portfolio with the cabinet, this is being separated in the Constitution, and the office of the Prosecutor General is being made as a constitutionally independent body. That is also to answer such grievances and to the responsibility of the prosecution to be carried out independently. In addition to that, We have our Human Rights Commission, as I said repeatedly, and we have other mechanisms in place, such as Police Integrity Commission. So I would say, for a small nation, for a country that did not inherit a legal system from its colonial masters or from its protectorates, this is a huge leap forward in terms of the piece of legislation that we have as a constitution and a number of legislation that is being produced every day in the Maldives. And the parliament has been really busy producing and answering all those. Thank
you. I think the head of delegation has given his viewpoints and explained clearly on the issue of torture. I just wanted to add that it is not right to say that Maldives has a history of systematic torture. I think this has become a very politicized issue, and there are many false allegations that are given, and it is unfortunate that it has sort of developed into, the politics has come into it. However, the government is committed. We have a new constitution in place and the independent bodies in place in order to address any issues or instances that may arise, and we should really look forward in terms of ensuring better rights for all, including those in detention and otherwise. I think we will now pass the floor. The head of delegation wishes to say something, but we look forward to
of the chair. Getting the international conventions into the Maldives legislation, as one of the questions was posed to us, is that the Maldives constitution subjects every international conventions before it takes effect domestically to be ratified into a different piece of legislation by Maldives Parliament. And with this regard, there was that regardless of in domestic process, the convention should prevail over the domestic legislations, or the features, the characteristics, the principle of the convention should carry effect in domestically. I would tend to accept these. I have no hesitation on accepting this, but as we all understand, these are debates, academic debates that goes on even in the academia, as to incorporation and non-cooperation of particular international covenant is important or not. We are not the only country which, in my understanding, has similar provision in its constitution. Others also carry similar provisions. But as I said, the reason why these provisions were provided in our constitution is basically because the understanding that democratically representatives should have a say before imposing any kind of obligations on its people, and that's the reason why the Maldives constitution very firmly says this domestic legislation should be made to take effect of the international conventions. I think I've tried to answer all relevant questions, but before concluding, I would welcome the comments made by honourable member with regard to Maldives, and to get, if possible, consultation with progressive Islamic interpretation of the laws and that takes place around the Muslim world. We are always welcome, and we always welcome to such invitation and initiatives. In fact, we have always tried to do that in the process of the Maldives constitution. For example, drafting stage, we've invited different international Muslim scholars, including Professor Hashim Kamali, is one of the renowned Muslim scholar of the jurisprudence, and also alongside with other international experts of non-Muslims as well. So there's no hesitation on that. We always try to comply with these international conventions, and we assure you that we will do our best to comply with these conventions. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Your Excellencies, for your responses to this to this first set of questions. There are some follow-up questions, and for this I'm going to call upon Mr. Oflaherty to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam, and through you may I thank the delegation for its very helpful responses. They were detailed, they were forthright, straightforward, and as a result their clarity provides a good basis for us to continue the dialogue. I have just a few follow-up points, two of which relate to what may be slight misunderstandings, but let's take those first. And in fact, the very first of those concerns the very last comments made by the distinguished head of delegation, because I believe I was certainly maybe the first member yesterday to raise the issue of incorporation, non-incorporation. And I want to reassure the delegation that I'm not suggesting that the dualist model is flawed. My own country has it. Most of the countries that have inherited elements of the common law follow that process, so that's not at issue. It's more, how do we ensure within a dualist model that the international treaties which bind internationally on the Maldives are given domestic effect. And it's for that reason, obviously then, that the provisions of the nature of some controversies around the Constitution become so enormously significant for our discussion, because that's the vehicle through which the covenant is given effect in the state party. And secondly, and again, I just wanted to clear up two things at the outset before getting to some specifics. Again, since I was the first member yesterday to raise some concerns about the form the report took there as well, I understand the position conveyed by the delegation and by the ambassador. But it is important to this committee that we always maintain a distinction in the Common Core document, specific document. We're all for our rules of procedure support what's called the enhanced Common Core document. And we recognise then that the treaty-specific report is going to be a much more discreet need. In fact, you've mentioned that the role OHCHR played here, we need to have a discussion with them, because if they're promoting a model of the Common Core document, which is in essence an integrated report for all the treaties, then they're promoting something that the treaty bodies definitively ruled out a number of years ago. In any case, as I say, I don't want to over-egg this, because as Mr. Iwasawa explained yesterday in some detail, the committee will be inviting you to consider using the list of issues approach for future reports, where you will simply write responses to questions rather than write a report. So it's all maybe academic at this point, but I just wanted to for clarification. Now, to a few specific points. The distinguished head of delegation began his comments this morning by explaining the religious nature of the Maldives and the implications that this has with regard to its legal framework, the provisions in its constitution and so forth. And I'm afraid there's no getting away from the fact that that raises an issue under the covenant, because and by the way, even if we were to consider the Article 18 reservation to be a valid one, about which there would be debate, it simply doesn't extend its reach to cover every dimension of the, let me call it, the Islamic override that you find in the Constitution. But that override, not a very technical term, but I think we know what I mean, mean that there's a protection of human rights. And since to be a citizen one has to be Muslim, we find ourselves in a situation where there's an inequality of human rights between the citizen and the non-citizen. And so it may otherwise be a fine constitution. This really is a problem and an issue under the covenant. Turning then to Commission membership, to membership of the National Human Rights Commission being reserved to Muslims, there I must say I simply don't understand the response. I'm at a loss to understand what the constitutional impediment is to the appointment of a non-Muslim to the Commission. It's not making a non-Muslim a citizen, it's making a non-Muslim a member of the Commission. And keeping in mind living moment, it does raise concern that they are precluded by definition from membership in the Commission. By the way, there should be no assumption that commissioners of human rights should be citizens of the state in which they work. I'm chief commissioner of an institution in a state of which I'm not a citizen. So I'm the proof that you don't need to be a citizen to be a member. Penultimately, in the context of invoking the covenant domestically, I raised the possibility yesterday of it being invoked in the courts for persuasive, albeit not binding effect, as it is in many common law jurisdictions. You haven't had an opportunity to answer me on that. Your answer is that it simply hasn't been the practice as of yet, which would be not at all unique to your country. Then if you could give an assurance that knowledge of the covenant and its use will be promoted among the judiciary and lawyers, that would be very welcome. And then I just want to finish up by suggesting that perhaps not quite as homogeneous suggest, thereby raising all the more powerfully the need for a human rights-based respect for diversity in the state party. And I'm struck into making this remark by paragraph of the Common Core. Enjoy a culturally diverse society. Many migrant workers from India, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh have come to live in the Maldives, attracted by the proximity to their home country. Make a major contribution to the modern-day Maldives. Many of them work in the education, construction and tourism sectors. Well, that seems to me is the modern-day Maldives. A way to ensure all of these people filtered through the domestic legal system, which has the Constitution as its centrepiece. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty. I now give the floor to Mr. Telling.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I got in last night and for the responses to the issues I raised yesterday. They were, to the most part, covering what I looked for. However, there are some issues that remain outstanding, and I will come to them. Firstly, I would like to of the and the Islamic principle tenet part of it. Just an added element to what has been said. You, Mr. Minister, made a reference to separation of power, and you as a reference point. And in my view, one couldn't find a better one. That system, in my view, is second to none. But it relies, as you know, on a very strong judicial branch. We have yet to cover issues on judiciary, but one of my colleagues, I think, anticipated that this will be the topic that we will discuss next. Well, you admitted in your answer that while there is effort to reconcile the Bill of Rights in your Constitution, which is a fair reflection of the Covenant, with Islam, there are a few exceptions. There are a few exceptions, I think, were your words. Well, the problem is just those exceptions. If you had two things, if you had a direct applicability of the Covenant, and again, I also come from a dualistic system, so I'm not critical of anyone who has that. But if you had a direct applicability and you had a strong judicial branch, you would find then a body who could interpret and reconcile the elements here and maybe find a way out of it. But I'm not certain, since you seem to be lacking at least the first one, namely the direct applicability. And as we, I guess, will see, the judicial branch could be strengthened. It doesn't offer any hope for those who claim in your country that their basic rights under our covenant are not respected because of the element of Islam, which, to be sure, I understand that this is a reflection of the popular will. But again, it makes the universality of Bill of Rights second to a religious tradition, and it should be the other way around, with all respect. So I just wanted to reinforce what has been said on that. Now, coming to the issue of torture, I'm grateful for your explanation that every citizen has a right to approach the independence of the prosecutor general and to pursue complaints in courts. Well, as you know, that is not good enough. I mean, you have yourself the Human Rights Commission here, which is also designated as the preventive mechanism under the Convention Against Torture. But we also see that there is a great discrepancy between reported incidents of torture and what is happening in the prosecutorial side and in the courts. And I would offer a suggestion, and here is obviously it's a question of those who are in the past, and I refer to a report covering the period of 78 till 2008. I think, in my view, that the government would be well advised to establish a separate commission to look into these issues and put that matter to rest. Because if you don't, I fear that the matter will be further politicized and no one will be gained by that. And that commission obviously should be authorized to then make sure that the proper authority, the prosecutor general, is seized with the of that. Starts compensation issues, one and for all. So to me, that seems to be an obvious step for the government to take. Secondly, I took heart, Minister, in your explaining that you didn't rule over the Police Integrity Commission. That was a relief to me. However, I just want to have clarification. I guess the purse string is still yours. The budget matters for the Commission. Is that within your purview, or would that rest directly with Parliament? Because that is obviously an important aspect of he who controls the purse controls the subject matter, as we all know from various walks of life. So I just want to have that clarified. I take it obviously that there is a time lag here after the establishment of the Commission, 2008. But although I still have to say that it seems that the output from the Commission's work is not satisfactory. I mean, given the 4 years that you have been working, the Commission has been working, I think the ratio of complaints coming in and what is being forwarded to the Prosecutor General should be a different one. So I would only here encourage you to make sure that that Commission has fully understood its mandate. On this as well, I don't think I got an answer to my issues. What happened when you have combined defense force and police force actions? Is it all falling within the police mandate, or would the matter be somehow channeled through the military apparatus? And the same goes for maltreatment in detention facilities, other than those under police supervision. Again, the need. Why we come back to the need for an independent and self-sufficient review mechanism here is obviously that since we're dealing with complaints against those who are perpetrators, the core spirit, for nothing else, could be a block to a full and in-depth investigation. That's why a standalone body is the best model here. And I enough in your one, which is more to a slightly different topic, which is an issue 3. It's not a major matter, but I still would like to have the answer. As you recall, it was a question of why the anti-terrorism bill was held up in relation to the penal code, which also seems to be held up. And the reason for that, I asked, was whether there was lack of parliamentary support or whether it was bogged down in the political rivalry of your country at the moment. Moving then to domestic violence, I'm grateful for the clarification regarding the shelters, and we look forward to having them up and running. On the sentencing guidelines, I still the question sentencing, and to what extent do you expect the new guidelines to entail more prison sentencing that the act the way we want in order to shape behavior here. So if you could clarify that, I would be grateful. When it comes then to the matter of corporal punishment in the school system, I now heard you refer to, I don't think, or to the, and I would just that act where prohibition is. Regarding the Educational Act, I reread the Human Rights Commission's report, and I would like to refer you to page 20. The human that the the date of the adoption of the Educational Act and the provision in it which deals with the prohibition of corporal punishment against issue 11, and there was a follow-up from my dear colleague as well on this one. You recognize, and this is paragraph 75 indeed under issue 6, that there is an inequality here. Women are flogged more often than men. And your answer, and you didn't touch upon it this morning, didn't make it clear whether you will increase flogging of men in order to whether you will abolish together, which obviously is preferable. And I think there was a question whether these punishments are meted out by Sharia courts. I understand this is Sharia law, but would there be special courts to do it, or would the ordinary courts hand down sanctions of this nature? That is my final request for the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Tedin. Ms. Vattenfall, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will thank the delegation for their replies, especially on my issue on death penalty. But I don't have a follow-up question. It's more a remark, because the discussion on the death penalty, I think, starts when crimes increases in your country. But as you know, studies have shown that death penalties doesn't increase crimes. So from this place, I still want to urge you to enact legislation to abolish.
Thank you. Jill, you now have the floor.
I'd like to actually, well, first of all, I want to thank the delegation for the answers to my questions in relation to Article 25, and I don't have follow-up questions on that. Obviously, we're all on tenterhooks to see what the Commission of Inquiry, the CONI, comes up with, and I suppose, if it's at all possible, I'd remind the delegation that I asked what kind of preparation is the government undertaking to prepare the society for whatever outcome there may be of the CONI, and if there's any possibility for a response to that question, I'd be grateful. I also want to, like Ms. Vattenfall, follow up on the death penalty dimension. First of all, I'm not quite clear about the nature of the moratorium. Of course, I'm very pleased that Bahrain, excuse me, I'm very pleased that the Maldives are indeed engaged in following a moratorium consistent with General Assembly resolutions on the topic. That's a very positive development. I'd be grateful for some information on exactly how it works. Are people sentenced to death still? And if they're sentenced to death, what happens? Are their sentences commuted, or do they remain under sentence of death? What will happen if the moratorium were to end, for example? Would they still be, would those who have been sentenced to death still be subject to the death penalty? So I'd be grateful for some clarification there. Like Ms. Vatterfall, even though it's a private member's bill, this bill that would introduce mandatory death penalty, which is just, we're clear about that, that would be incompatible with the covenant, a mandatory death penalty. We've been clear about that for a long time, and so is just about every other regional human rights court or treaty body. There's nothing special. Our position is certainly not anomalous in that respect. But I understand it's a private member's bill. I don't quite the language both of the written response and indeed of the delegation seems to accept, and here I share precisely Ms. Vatterfall's concern, that somehow the increasing crime rate would justify the resort penalty and mandatory death penalty when one UN study after another has concluded that there is no conclusive information suggesting that the death penalty is an effective deterrent to crime any more than other points be assured of getting caught and then being tried and convicted and sentenced. It's not the death penalty per se that is convincingly argued to be a deterrent. And so I would be interested in knowing the passage of this particular private member's bill through the legislature. Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you, Sir Nigel. I now give the floor to Mr. Sassenbaev. You have the floor, sir. Mr. Sassenbaev.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would also like to welcome the delegation of the Maldives, as my colleagues have done, and thank them for the replies that they have given today to the various questions put by our colleagues. And yet, I believe that the question relating to the reservation to Article 18 of the Covenant is one that is of a concern to me. And I have a question as to the reservation to Article 18 of the Covenant. Now, the unwillingness of the government to remove that reservation is due to which reason? Is it because the society is fully Muslim and therefore there is no need to say that there are other religions? At the same time, the reluctance to withdraw this reservation could be due to the fact that if you withdraw this reservation, then your islands in the Maldives may be the site of a major influx of foreigners, and it will be difficult to live together. might be to the islands from other societies might represent a more attractive model of life and thereby influence those who are in the Maldives to change their worldview, and this would change society. So these are a few of the hypotheses which I have, but there may be other reasons, and perhaps you could shed some light on this. The next issue society, that it is simply a postulate that Islam is the government religion, the state religion. You know, however, that in the Muslim world there are quite a few countries where the religion is, but at the same time the state exists separately from Islam and fulfills its obligations both domestically and of its international. It might make sense experience of those Islamic states and make attempts to separate Islam from the state. That is to say, the Ummah would be responsible Article 18, as well as other articles and other international human rights documents. Another comment. I would like to support my colleagues, in particular Ms. Waterval and Sir Nigel, when they said that the death penalty is not a means to prevent. It is not a main feature in preventing crime, and so I think that if you say that there is a wave of crime, there may be some good reason. The economic, organizational underlying root causes of this crime. And then you will have other means of settling the issue of the crime wave rather than judiciary means. Then there's one more point. You, the head of the delegation, stated that a statute of limitations should not exist with respect to some claims. Now, this position does have some advantages. If there are human rights violations, then claims should be investigated regardless of any statute of limitations. But I do have the feeling, and I may be wrong, that there is a statute of limitations in reference to compensations. That is to say, people have been waiting for several years for compensation to be granted to them. So I would state that statute of limitations should indeed apply to claims, but they should not apply to compensations that people have been waiting for. That is to say that compensations should be granted quickly. And if that is not being done by the relevant officials, then those officials should be punished. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sassenbaev. I now give the floor to Mr. Ben Achu. You have the floor, sir.
شكرا سيدتي الرئيسة. أود قبل أن أتوغل في
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. With regard to the right to faith, I would like to ask a question related to a fact. We have all understood from the Constitution that the Constitution stipulates that Islam is the religion of the state of the Maldives. But the Constitution says Islam, no adjective, no definition, whether it is a Sunni Islam or otherwise. But in all your interventions and in the report that was submitted by the Maldives, mentioned as the Sunni Islam. So my question here is the following. My question is whether the Sunni Islamic, the Islamic Maldives belongs to a certain jurisdiction. Is it the Hanafi? It's the Hanbali? Is it another sect of the Islam? This question has to do with the first piece of information. The second question is, what is the situation? What is the situation of the other doctrines? For example, other than the Sunni doctrine. Do they exist? What about the Shia? Does it exist? Thank you.
I now give the floor to Mr. Salvioli.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the delegation for their responses that they've given us this morning. I should say that my questions were answered partially. Some were, and others weren't. So if I may, I will make several comments regarding the questions that I asked. I think that the dialogue does make it clear that the delegation recognises that progress needs to be made in terms of gender equality, and I take note of the valuable information provided to us regarding the measures that the state is taking. Many of these measures will come into force in the future, and they are being implemented currently, but we will, of course, be closely following developments. Also, the fact that the state plans to eradicate domestic violence, that it's carried out awareness-raising campaigns. And for time reasons now, I won't ask you to go into the awareness-raising campaigns in detail, but I would be very grateful if you could give us specific examples in writing following the end of our discussions. Not the end of the session, I say, not the end of our discussions with the state, but we can give you a few days to provide that information to us. But as I say, there have been some questions that haven't been answered. I asked questions regarding domestic provisions and whether these domestic provisions are considered to be compatible with the covenant. For example, the fact that in some courts the woman's testimony is valid equates to that of half of the man's. Now, how does the state view that as being compatible with the covenant? I also asked questions on criminalization of homosexuality. Those questions were not answered either here. The state party mentions the application of norms of conformity with Sharia law in accordance with the national constitution, but we don't apply the national constitution when it comes to any state. There is an international standard which is applied to all states, and the states know that they cannot invoke the dispositions of their provisions of their domestic law to comply with an international standard. So what I wanted to hear was this practice in light of the covenant, not in light of the national constitution or Sharia. Finally, I am pleased to hear that the state is making efforts to eradicate discrimination regarding inheritance, and that in practice, according to what has been said this morning, this discrimination no longer exists. If this is indeed the case, then surely the bill can be adopted so that discrimination no longer exists either in practice or indeed in the normative documents. Now, I do thank the delegation very much, and I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I now call upon Mr. Rivas Posada. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask a very brief question regarding the constitutional norm which establishes the obligation of being Muslim, according to the Constitution, which we've discussed at length here. My question is as follows. According to Article 9 of the Convention, no citizen, or rather no person who is in the Maldives can acquire the nationality of the country unless they are Muslim. That is according to Article 9 of your Constitution. You have given partial explanations to justify this. But of course I'm referring here to the migratory population, people who come to the Maldives and who would hope to become nationals of that country. But my concern relates to those who already have Maldivian nationality and for whatever reason, and maybe an exceptional reason, but what happens to a Maldivian citizen who is a national of that country, but who then converts to another religion? In accordance with this provision, they should lose their nationality if things happen consistently. But I'd be interested to know what other sanctions there are, what other punishment might this person incur, this person who post data then leaves the Muslim religion when they're already a Maldivian citizen or national. Is there any case law on this? Is there anything to prevent them being punished if they change their religion subsequent to being a national of your country? I think this is an important aspect to be borne in mind. This is a problem that's been mentioned a lot this morning, and it does raise the committee's justified concerns in terms of compatibility with the Covenant. We have heard some, I would say, imaginative explanations on justifying the practice of this norm, but the committee is left with the feeling that there is clear incompatibility between the constitutional situation regarding freedom of religion and the provisions of the Covenant. I would be grateful if you could provide further information on this for us. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rivas Posada. I now give the floor to the Honourable Head of Delegation, Minister Ahmed, for responses to these follow-up questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the very fruitful discussion and comments which has been made by the committee members. Let me first start with the comments made with regard to the incidents of torture and the possibility of those being investigated. I think the honourable member has made a very compelling and useful comment on this particular point, and the observation is an interestingly a good one for us. I would hope that whenever the government decides to establish such a commission, it would not only be limiting the incidents of such torture between the period that is mentioned in particular report. As I have emphasized earlier, much heinous crimes has been committed prior to 1977, as I explained, in the southernmost two atolls. President entirely forcibly removed, and they still have been continuously advocating for their rights and possible compensation for what had happened to them. And in addition to that, such a commission should also include the 1988 mercenary attack by Tamil Tigers with the help of certain Maldivians on the Maldives population, which has seen 19 lives being lost. So I hope I take the advice of the member of the Commission. I think it's a very useful observation and suggestion, and I will take that suggestion to the government of the Maldives for its deliberation. With regard to the question of the budgetary issue, budget of the Maldives Police Service along with the Home Ministry and the Police Integrity Commission goes together to the Parliament, and as any other piece of legislation, this particular piece of legislation may need further improvement to address any deficiencies that prevails in that particular context, and I duly take the observation made by a distinguished member of the committee, and we'll try to address those concerns as well. With regard to the number of people being sent for prosecution by the Integrity Commission, I again take the observation made by the honourable member of the committee, and I would, for one person, we'll see what are the possible explanation for the lack of the cases that is being sent for prosecution, and what possible expertise or assistance that is required for this particular commission, although I can only make a recommendation, and I hope that this will in future may address certain difficulties or deficiencies that exist with the functioning of this particular commission. Coming back to the question of the victims relating to the actions by police and defence force, I must say that the mandate of the Police Integrity Commission is only to look for the functionality and the way that the function being discharged by the Maldives police force alone and not the Maldives defence force. And for any such incidents, I would assume that other mechanisms that exist within the judicial and legal system of the country will come into operation. Hence, it will go for Maldives police force to investigate, as in such incidents it has. Human Rights Commission should also fall within that regime, and the Maldives legal and judicial system as overall will be the overseen mechanism for any action that is being carried out by Maldives Defence Force. Other than that, to my understanding, there doesn't exist any particular form of mechanism to address any shortfall by the Defence Force. To the question relating to anti-terrorism bill, I apologize for not answering in the early session. Of course, this was raised yesterday as well. Honourable member of the committee has raised the question very validly. It is the penal code itself is more bulkier piece of legislation, but which is now in somewhat moving. But I must say that it is not a speedy process. It has taken, I think, almost 9 years now in the Parliament, and only the current debate in the country might somewhere have forced members to again act quickly on this matter, and hence the committee that is revising this particular bill has said that they have now taken action and speed up their work, and they expect the work to be completed within 2 months. But in relation to anti-terrorism bill, much lesser, much a smaller piece of legislation, presumably in comparison to criminal procedure, penal code, has taken about 4 years. I would assume that probably this is due to a technical assistance that may have required in the drafting stage of the bill. I would gracefully take the distinguished members' observation that I will try to push for the passage of this bill as soon as possible. I guarantee for that. This is, again, important in relation to our commitment to international governance, and as well as domestic and international needs. For the coming back to the question of certain forms of sentences being awarded or being given by separate courts, here I would like to give an explanation of the Maldives judicial and legal system. Maldives judicial and legal system does not have a separate form of a court system where you witness in some other Muslim countries such as Malaysia, for example. They do have alongside what they call a civil court system or civil legal system alongside with Sharia court system. Maldives has one legal system, and it is a fused system where the courts have the jurisdiction to hear both civil and Sharia matters as a practice, and there's no separation in line with Sharia offences and civil offences. For example, the civil court would always have the jurisdiction on all matters relating to civil offences, but those who comes from a common law jurisdiction would understand when you say Muslim civil law would only meant that of a family and inheritance matter, but it's not the case. All commercial, contractual, torts, and all other matters are equally heard by civil courts. Same goes with the criminal court. It will hear all codified, uncodified, and Sharia matters in the same court. Family court, there is a separate family court in the Maldives for the purpose of speedy judicial process only. And this particular court only hears matters relating to matrimony, divorce, marriages, and of course alumni and all other matters relating to children's welfare. So I hope that answers that question. I will now pass to Ms. Diane.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members, for the clarifications on questions you raised yesterday that we were perhaps not able to attend to. With regards to the reporting and treaty reporting, I think I will request my ambassador to comment further on that. We do welcome the comments that we should try and adjust in order to have treaty-specific reporting, and definitely, despite our limitations in terms of capacity and resources, we take that into consideration, and we'll be looking into that further. On the issue of the Human Rights Commission and membership being limited to Muslims, that is how the legislation stands at present. That does not obviously preclude the fact that we may be able to bring in changes into that legislation in order to ensure that non-Muslims can also sit in the commission. But actually the issue has not arisen as such in our community because, as explained earlier, it is a homogeneous community whereby all Maldivians have been historically Muslims. We do take into fact the consideration there's a especially migrant workers coming into the country who are working there, who are non-Muslims in modern-day Maldives, but they're not settled as communities as such. They're sort of mobile communities in terms of the fact that they come in, work there for a specified period of time and leave. The other non-Muslims come into the country specifically tourism-related, and they're, again, not part of the community of Maldives as such. They're very separate on resort islands, come on holiday and leave. So I think these issues are not issues that we have had to grapple with as such at present, but I'm sure these are issues we would need to be grappling with in future, and we do take into consideration the concerns that you have raised in terms of looking into how to address these. Again, on the issue of torture, I think the Minister has also touched on it, the head of delegation. As you say, it may be well worth to establish a commission to look into issues of torture and to ensure that these are addressed, though they may have occurred historically. We take your point into consideration. I just want to highlight, though, that given the political situation in the country, it has been extremely difficult to establish any independent commissions looking into any issues at present, because everything is extremely politicized, and it always has become a matter of which political side you're on or who you are trying to sort of go after in terms of alleged crimes that may have been committed in the past. But I think it's an issue that the country does need to deal with and come to terms with. Our own viewpoint on the delegation is we should try our best to address what's happened in the we have been trying to point fingers and looking back into the past and been unable to move ahead in terms of going on with our lives, but definitely very much take into consideration the points that you have put across. I think the Minister mentioned about the anti-terrorism bill and also the anti-torture bill, the penal code. There's a lot of legislation which seems to be stuck in our parliament, and again, this is largely due to the politics of the situation. Following the 2008 change, when President Nasheed came into power in Parliament, while he had at some points not clear majority in Parliament, but he did later on have very clear majority in Parliament, had there been the will in the government at that point in time to push through legislation that we required to of human rights, progress be made, but unfortunately we did not. And as many of you are aware, President Nasheed came in with the aspirations of a lot of Maldivians that he would bring in rapid changes in terms of consolidating our democracy, but unfortunately the situation did not work out that way, and the events that power as well. This government, we're definitely committed and dedicated to pushing through these legislations, and as part of the delegation, I would like to commit to saying that we would definitely lobby and work for that when we return back home. Just to give you that, it's not an easy process. There's a number of parties in this government. It's a coalition government. While we have tentative numbers, it's not such a clear and easy task within Parliament as well, but it's definitely something we will be working for and look forward to going ahead on that. I think on the domestic violence legislation, I don't have all the detailed information that was requested. I was personally myself very much involved in putting this act together, consulting with the different parties and consulting with NGOs and all the relevant stakeholders on the anti-domestic violence legislation. Definitely it's a criminal offense. While there are fines, there are also prison sentences in there in terms of how to sort of address the issue of adequate punishment for perpetrators. I asked my further information on that because I think it would not be fair for me to go into details which I do not have at present. On the issue of corporal punishment, I've got the Children's Rights Act here with me. It's Article 10 of, if I'm right. The wording is quite vague in that it says that any punishment given to children, which could cause them psychological or bodily harm, which is not, 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 which apt for their age group. So again, this is not a very recent law, and perhaps at that time we were not dealing with these issues of corporal punishment. Again, I'm not aware of the details of the Education Act, but that's something we would look into, and it's an issue, the regulation. It's something that we will consider, and we will look into strengthening the legislation in this area when we go back home. As we mentioned before, it's not widespread. Instances do occur, but if there are additional steps that we can take to address it, that's definitely something that we would want to go ahead with. I think on the death penalty issue, perhaps the head of delegation would wish to add further as well. The sentence is there. It is actually, the system was one of pardoning prior to that, and we called this an unofficial moratorium because it's not officially there in any legislation as such. So the death penalty exists in the Maldives. There was an unofficial moratorium which continues to stand at present. The legislation, as I understand it, is to remove the power of pardoning and to sort of ensure that the sentence is carried out. That's something that we are definitely concerned about and we would wish to look into. And as the committee members have raised many times, studies have shown that the death penalty itself does not deter crime. And in our country, there is an issue of crime linked very much with drugs amongst young people, and we believe we need to really, we have been analyzing and studying the situation. Obviously, we have not been able to take adequate steps to address young people going into drugs and into crime, and thereby preventing this escalating crime in our country. But we take your point that this is what we do need to look into. I'm not able to commit as such on the death penalty issue because it's a highly sensitive issue, and obviously the national stakeholders would have very much a say on it. But on our part, we are concerned that this discussion is back, and we do understand the sensitivities and the fact that this does not solve the problems that we are facing at present. In terms of the reservation to Article 18, which I understand is extremely sensitive, as I mentioned earlier, it is the wish of our society and people. And why I say this is because the 2008 Constitution was drafted by a special majlis, which was put into place. How many members in it? How many members the special majlis? 50. Yeah. The special majlis is constituted just for redrafting the Constitution, and it is a large assembly, representatives of the people, and they chose to put in this clause in terms of the fact that Islam is the official religion of the state, and also linking citizenship to being Muslim, which I think, as I explained to you, has become very much part of Maldivian identity and something that Maldivians wish to retain. And that is why this has come in, and this is why we have to put in the reservation into the article. We understand issues there in terms of perhaps people being denied their citizenship, but this matter has actually not arisen as such in the country, because while we say who is practicing Muslim, who is doing what, I mean, people are free to practice their religion as such. So the question of having to give up citizenship for a Maldivian who has renounced his religion or no longer practices Islam has not arisen as such. But the other way around, whereby Maldivians coming, non-Maldivians from outside coming into the society and settling down or living or marrying, getting citizenship is an issue for non-Muslims, and that's something I believe that we do need to consider for the future. So I will leave my comments on that for now. I think finally, the Honourable Member asked about the kind of Islam. Traditionally, Maldivians have been Sunni Muslims belonging to the Shafi sect. So we've had only one sect as such in the Maldives, and that's why we say it was a very homogeneous society. We didn't have the other sects being practiced or Shia Islam being practiced in the Maldives. So this has been the way it has. And as you mentioned before, many of our documents, while the Constitution says that the official religion is Islam and does not say a particular sect as such, there are other laws and documents in the past that specified Sunni Muslim earlier on. I do not have the additional information on that, but I think the head of delegation may wish to add to that. Finally, definitely we will come back on providing information on the domestic violence and also gender equality and empowerment of women in terms of awareness-raising campaigns and the work that the government has been doing, and also additional plans it has for the future as well. On the issue of homosexuality, obviously, as a Muslim country, it is not something that is allowed, and that I think the question was raised yesterday. We did not get back on that. I think the figures do not show huge numbers of people being prosecuted or tried for this crime or punished, but definitely as a Muslim country, that's not something that's allowed in the country. I think I've covered most of some of the issues that were raised by the honourable members of the committee. If there's any additional clarifications, definitely our delegation would be happy to get back to you, and I'll pass the floor to the head of delegation.
Well, thank you very much. With the permission of the chair, again, coming back to the first question that we had in this morning, with regard to the provision of the international covenant practically being implemented domestically, I'd like to give an explanation here that the Constitution provides that international covenant be enforced in the Maldives through a piece of legislation passed by the Parliament. That is one of the venue that is provided. That's what we have been saying all along. Other than that, interestingly, as the member has taken any note when these rights has been invoked before a court of law. I'm glad here to explain that few of the instances that has taken place in the Maldives has seen that quite often international covenants been invoked. For example, in 2010, the then President Nasheed arrested Honorable Yamin, Member of Parliament, and Mr. Qasim, as well Member of Parliament. In their arrest, I was representing them at that time as a lawyer at Supreme Court, and we had the opportunity to invoke the international covenant on the very covenant that we are talking now, ICCPR. And I'm glad to notice that the Supreme Court in particular convention, arrest and detention were arbitrary, and the Maldives courts are subjected to these conventions. And as well, it has explained to the right of a habeas corpus, and very broadly has given its explanation in particular judgment. And in much later, in 2011 again, when President Nasheed again arrested several politicians, including myself, again the Criminal Court of the Maldives referred the same judgment and asked the relevant authorities to release the detainees. In this perspective, I would also like to draw the attention of the members of the committee to Article 68 of the Maldives Constitution, which very interestingly has given explanation that a court or tribunal shall promote the values that underlie an open and democratic society based on human dignity, equality and freedom, and shall consider international treaties to which the Maldives is a party. So here you have very interesting provisions in the Constitution. On one hand, when you have Article 4 and Article 16 and Article 10 of the Constitution, which subjects all laws to Sharia law, it also gives a wide range of options and opportunities to invoke other open democratic and international treaties. So the answer is yes. There are instances where the court has assumed, I would say in some instances very vigorously, the rights that is embodied in international treaties while defending the rights of the citizen in the Maldives. But here is probably a try by a Muslim nation, an instance where they've been trying to best harmonize both Islamic law and modern democratic values that is found on international treaties as well as other democratic societies. But in doing so, it is also mindful of to what extent it can also retain the features of the Muslim law. And the question that is raised here is understandable, but equally, the Constitution very clearly says Islam is the main source of all laws in the Maldives, and therefore the offences that is being raised here, or that is being prescribed in the Maldives, embodies both common law as well as Sharia offences. And homosexuality is one of the offences that is prescribed under Sharia. And the penalty that is available for certain offences includes flogging, and that's the reason why it is being retained in the Maldives judicial system. Again, I would like to stress here that there is no discrimination in terms of implementation of these punishments between male and female, be it flogging and other punishments. The concern was raised by the submission that on the number of cases that have been investigated, we found more female being subjected to this form of punishment than male, and probably this is one area which we will have to conduct further investigation and studies. And as it has been highlighted, the Maldives belongs to a Sunni faith, traditionally the Shafi'i sect of the Muslim faith, and in some instances, though the Article 4 and 2 doesn't specifically provide it has to be a Sunni Muslim, but in other provisions of the Constitution, instances are provided where it has categorically said that also, interestingly. For example, Article 72 of the Constitution is stating the criteria of members of the Majlis. It states, for example, it has to be a Sunni Muslim. So this is one instance which has stated that. Is there other questions? Coming back to the question of the testimony of female witnesses, again, I must say that we are in the process of trying to further advance the legal system in the country. As it is, I have repeatedly been saying, the country introduced 2008 Constitution with the hope of introducing a more open and democratic society with a very progressive Bill of Rights. In the same way, the Parliament has been trying and struggling to introduce several other pieces of legislation that are required to implement the things that has been provided in the Constitution. Unfortunately, we find ourselves up to this date many pieces of legislation lacking to provide to further strengthen the rights that are provided in the Constitution. For example, the country still hasn't received a proper criminal and civil procedure code. And in the absence of the criminal procedure code, both the courts and the prosecution system as well as the investigation authorities struggle to meet the challenges that it daily faces within the system. In the same way, it also doesn't have a proper evidence code. The current evidence code is just about a one-page document, which very briefly states that in such matters Islamic law will apply, and in certain other matters the circumstantial evidences also takes place. So probably in this Evidence Act we will find answers to the question raised by Honourable Member of the Committee. But again, even now also, it is in very limited circumstances that these discriminations are applied, as Muslim fuqahas and jurists applies in other circumstances relating to, for example, in instances of adultery and fornication only. But in other instances, female witnesses takes over male witnesses. For example, in instances relating to children and their welfare. This is, of course, substantive law. But on those instances, there are instances where male witnesses carries less weight than female witnesses. So I think if there's no additional issues, we would still be happy to answer those questions. We hope that we will always be able to meet our international obligations while also trying to retain the features that is embodied in the Constitution. It is not for us only to decide and to say that this should be the way for the people of the Maldives. It's a much larger issue, and most of the issues that is being raised here is very valid questions with regard to our commitments to international treaties. I recognize that, but I also want to draw to the attention of our honourable members, being a very small country and a country which is struggling a huge change over a very short period of time, there is a real question of the capacity in terms of both human resource infrastructure as well as the secondary legislation. And I hope the incoming days will be able to provide answers and solutions for those questions that is raised. But yes, with regard to the question of the torture victims, I think there's a very pragmatic answer being given, and I will take that to the country, and I hope to find a solution for all the victims that has grievances. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you once again to the distinguished delegation for adding more detail to. Yes. I thank the delegation so far for the additional information they've given us. I see that there's one member who wanted to take the floor again, but we are running a little behind time. So if it's not a long question, we'll take it, but otherwise we can entertain it in the second set.
Thank you, Madam. I'll make it short. And if we're not wasting time, because I would have had to raise this in the second half in any case, because it suffuses the whole discussion for part one and part two, and that is that famous reservation. And I just want to add one dimension. I'm not inviting a response from the delegation. They've made their views perfectly clear, but it's incumbent on me in the context of our work in the committee to ensure that we have in our record our concerns with regard to the reservation to Article 18. We have, as I'm sure the delegation knows, adopted a general comment with regard to permissibility of reservations and how such permissibility can be rather clear that the reservation to Article 18, as laid out at paragraph 109 of the core document, it does not comply with the requirements for a permissible reservation. In the first place, even taking account of explanations given by the state party, the formulation of the reservation makes it appear to include, to reserve with